For as long as audiences have gathered around glowing screens, there has been a quiet fascination with the moments when actors seem to let the mask slip. Interviews are supposed to be controlled. Rehearsed anecdotes, safe jokes, and polite conversations designed to promote a movie or maintain a carefully constructed public persona. Yet scattered throughout entertainment history are rare, strange, unforgettable interviews where something unpredictable happened. Moments that became infamous not because the host was unprepared, but because the guest arrived in a world entirely of their own. Some came intoxicated, some came angry, and others seemed to drift through the studio in a haze of emotion and chaos. And while these unscripted moments horrified producers, they also created some of the most iconic, bizarre, and talked about appearances ever recorded on television. These are the stories of the top 8 most unhinged actor interviews, conversations that left hosts baffled, audiences stunned, and the actors themselves remembered not for the film they were promoting, but for the implosion that occurred on live TV. When Joaquin Phoenix walked onto David Letterman's stage in 2009, viewers immediately sensed something was wrong. Phoenix appeared wearing oversized sunglasses and a full, unruly beard, as if he had wandered onto the stage directly from the woods. Throughout the interview, he barely spoke, and when he did, the mumbling came out as scattered fragments rather than coherent conversation. Letterman attempted to keep the interview alive with humor and sharp jabs, but Phoenix responded with only long silences, shrugs, and the occasional confused stare. Every question seemed to slide right past him. Was he exhausted? Was he on something? Was he having a breakdown? Nobody could tell. Letterman, a master of uncomfortable humor, told him, "I'll say the beard is working," trying to coax him into a joke, but Phoenix sat stone-faced. The audience fluctuated between laughter and uneasy murmurs, unsure whether they were witnessing performance art or a genuine crisis unraveling on live television. Only much later did Phoenix reveal that the appearance was part of an elaborate fictional persona for mockumentary. Yet, even knowing that, the interview remains unsettling. It captured the strange tension of a man committed so deeply to a role that he intentionally let the world think he was falling apart. 2 decades before Phoenix, Crispin Glover delivered an interview so chaotic that Letterman abruptly walked off his own show. Glover arrived dressed in a mismatched, eccentric outfit, his hair hanging wildly as if electricity had run through it moments before cameras rolled. As soon as he sat down, it became obvious that he was not truly there in the way most guests are. His speech came out in disjointed, emphatic bursts, like someone reading from multiple scripts at once. He rambled about people who supposedly doubted his strength, as if he were reliving an argument no one else had witnessed. Then came the infamous moment. Glover leapt from his seat and threw a high kick inches from Letterman's face, his heavy platform shoe slicing through the air, so close that the audience gasped. Letterman, unfazed but clearly annoyed, stood up and said he was leaving until his guests calmed down. Glover tried to speak again, but the host was already gone. The interview spiraled into television legend. For years, Glover insisted he had been performing a character, but the line between performance and absurdity was so blurry that even now, viewers debate whether he lost control or simply wanted to create chaos on live TV. And Hechi's 1998 interview with Tony Danza remains one of the most surreal in talk show history. She sat beside Danza, smiling softly, her eyes drifting upward as if she were trying to recall something from a distant dream. Instead of promoting her film, she spoke of a parallel identity she claimed to inhabit, a celestial figure she said came from another dimension. Her voice was calm and melodic as she described communicating with higher beings, almost as though she had momentarily stepped out of her own body. Danza, visibly unsettled, attempted to ask grounded questions, but the interview kept slipping into cosmic territory. Hechi laughed unpredictably, reflecting on her alleged interdimensional experiences with the confidence of someone discussing a vacation. She mentioned hearing voices, receiving messages, and slipping into an alternate consciousness. The studio audience shifted in their seats, trying to understand whether she was being metaphorical or literal. Years later, Hechi would explain that she had been struggling with deep psychological trauma and dissociation. But in that moment on national television, she delivered a haunting snapshot of a celebrity speaking openly from a place of pain and confusion, raw, unfiltered, and deeply human. Tom Hardy has earned a reputation for being authentic, sometimes brutally so, and his 2008 promotional interview showcased this candor in unforgettable form. Dressed sharply but exuding restless energy, Hardy spoke about addiction with a level of detail and honesty rarely heard in a press interview. He described waking up in strange places after days-long benders, unable to remember how he'd gotten there. At one point he admitted, without flinching, that he had once woken up covered in his own vomit, with no memory of the night before. His words spilled out in a frank, almost confessional tone, as if he were speaking to a therapist rather than a reporter. The interviewer attempted to steer the conversation back toward the film he was promoting, but Hardy continued talking about substances, self-destruction, and the long climb back to sobriety. There was no glamour in the way he told it, just raw truth, delivered by a man unafraid to expose the darkest parts of his past. It was jarring for a promotional setting, but viewers appreciated the sincerity. Hardy's willingness to show the messy reality behind his public persona made the interview unforgettable and further solidified his reputation as an actor who refuses to play by Hollywood's rules. Before Mickey Rourke reinvented himself, he was considered one of Hollywood's most promising actors, but also one of its most volatile. Throughout the late 1980s, he participated in a series of interviews that could only be described as confrontational theater. Rourke appeared agitated, as though each question prodded a wound he didn't want exposed. If the interviewer asked something friendly, he brushed it off. If they asked something critical, he snapped back sharply. His body language alternated between slouched exhaustion and sudden, explosive irritation. At one point in an overseas interview, Rourke muttered comments under his breath, then loudly criticized the questions he was being asked, accusing the interviewer of ignorance. Viewers were left unsure whether he was annoyed at the press, struggling with personal issues, or simply burning out under the spotlight. The tension radiated through the screen. Each interview felt like a tug-of-war between Rourke's talent and his self-destructive impulses. Those chaotic media appearances became emblematic of his troubled years, an era he would later reflect on with regret, acknowledging that he often sabotaged his own career while wrestling with inner turmoil. Shia LaBeouf has reinvented himself many times, but none of his transformations were as bewildering as the period when he declared himself a full-time performance artist. During this phase, he appeared in numerous interviews wearing a paper bag over his head, one boldly scrawled with the words, "I am not famous anymore." Sometimes he remained totally silent, even when interviewers asked simple questions. Other times he offered cryptic, philosophical statements, as though answering riddles only he understood. In one interview, he responded to nearly every question with a single repeated phrase, "I'm just here, man." In another, he abruptly walked out without explanation, leaving the host to awkwardly thank the audience as though nothing unusual had happened. LaBeouf later insisted that these actions were intentional components of a larger artistic commentary on celebrity culture. But regardless of the stated intention, the interviews felt erratic and impenetrable. They left viewers unsure whether they were witnessing art, rebellion, or an identity crisis unfolding in slow motion. What remains undeniable is that Shia LaBeouf's bag era delivered some of the most bewildering interview footage Hollywood has ever produced. Oliver Reed was known for embracing chaos, and his late-night interview on Aspel and Company may be the clearest example. Reed stumbled onto the stage, clearly intoxicated, smiling broadly and swaying as he attempted to sit down. His speech slurred, and his laughter erupted at random intervals. He flirted shamelessly with fellow guests, interrupting them mid-sentence to slur compliments or crack jokes that made little sense. When host Michael Aspel attempted to regain control of the conversation, Reed simply rolled over him, speaking louder, gesturing broadly, and on one occasion, sliding so far down his chair that the audience dissolved into laughter. His unpredictable behavior ranged from clumsy charm to near disaster. He tried to sing at one point, then attempted to stand up, but nearly toppled forward. The camera crew scrambled to adjust angles as Reed drifted in and out of frame. The entire interview felt like a man wrestling his own intoxication while the world watched. Although many viewers would later describe the moment as comedic, others saw it as a sad portrait of a talented actor battling demons he could not hide. Either way, Oliver Reed delivered one of the wildest talk show segments in history. Peter O'Toole's visit to Johnny Carson ranks as one of the most unpredictably delightful interviews ever aired. O'Toole arrived with the energy of a man who had already enjoyed several drinks before stepping onto the stage. He carried himself with a mixture of regal confidence and playful mischief, launching into stories that meandered unpredictably between profound reflection and absolute absurdity. At one moment, he recounted tales of performing Shakespeare in his youth, and in the next he veered off into an anecdote about riding a camel through the desert while half drunk. The peak of the interview came when Carson mentioned O'Toole's well-known fondness for drinking. Instead of offering a polite laugh or a modest denial, O'Toole launched into a long, poetic description of his favorite bar in Ireland, comparing the experience of drinking there to a religious pilgrimage. He described bartenders as priests of joy, pints as chalices of serenity, and the pub itself as a cathedral of laughter. Carson tried to interject, but O'Toole swept on, building the description with theatrical flair, delighting the audience with each exaggerated detail. At one point, O'Toole described a time he had attempted to ride a camel into a London pub after a night of drinking. Carson stared at him in disbelief, asking whether the story was true. O'Toole leaned forward with a sly smile and said, "Johnny, at the time, it was true enough for me." The audience roared. Even Carson, known for handling difficult guests, appeared caught between amusement and amazement. O'Toole's charisma turned what could have been a disaster into a masterpiece of unscripted television, an intoxicating blend of charm, chaos, humor, and poetic madness.